The ocean is a graveyard of secrets, where the Iron Atlas now rests in a tomb of rusted steel and eternal, freezing silence. My lungs burned as the last of the air escaped, my vision blurring while the twisted metal of my ship mirrored in my dying eyes. In that final moment of surrender, I felt the cold embrace of the abyss pulling me down into the heart of the world's end. But the sea is a fickle mistress. It does not take what it has not chosen, and it was not yet my time to vanish. Suddenly, a dormant power surged through my veins, an ancient legacy carved into my skin that refused to let my spirit flicker out. A blinding blue light shattered the darkness, sending a shockwave through the depths that announced a monster had awakened in the silent deep. From the shadows of the trenches, a phantom of legend appeared, a creature of myth reaching out to claim its kin from the jaws of death. The ocean did not want me to die. It wanted me to remember the legacy I carried. As I was propelled toward the light, I woke up on the edge of the world, a forgotten island made of volcanic glass, and the skeletal remains of ships long lost to time. The wind carried the scent of salt and ancient decay, whispering that survival here was a gift that had to be earned every single day. The mark of the dragon had changed me, binding my soul to the tides and granting me a strength that felt both alien and destined. To stay alive, I had to return to the primitive ways of my ancestors, forging tools from the wreckage of the modern world I left behind. I learned to read the ripples of the water and the shadows of the reef, becoming a hunter in a land that only knew how to kill. My movements were no longer human. They were guided by a primal instinct that struck faster than the eye could follow, reaping the sea's bounty. Each kill was a testament to my adaptation, a brutal necessity to fuel the fire that burned within my newly awakened, draconic blood. The nights were the hardest, spent in the belly of the earth, where the shadows seemed to whisper the names of those who failed before. The taste of charred salt and smoke became my only comfort, a meager feast that kept the cold and the madness at a distance. Water was more precious than gold. I harvested the sky's tears to wash away the salt that threatened to encrust my very soul and skin. I wasn't just surviving, I was evolving, the island's harsh spirit fusing with the legacy in my veins to create something entirely new and powerful. I scavenged the ruins of the Iron Atlas, turning the remnants of my former life into a fortress against the elements and the unknown. Every knot tied and every chain secured was a link to my sanity, a small victory in an endless war against the unforgiving coastal winds. This was my kingdom of scrap and stone, a lonely bastion where I waited for the strength to face the horizon once again. To avoid being swallowed by this island, I had to become its master, merging my will with the very rock and tide around me. The time for hiding was over. The call of the open sea was louder than the crashing waves, demanding that I seek my true destiny. I built my escape from the iron and timber of my past, a raft designed to ride the currents that most men would fear to touch. Each vine was woven with a prayer for passage, a desperate construct of hope held together by the grit of a man with nothing left. The earth tried to hold me back, but the dragon's strength fueled my legs, driving me to push past the limits of human endurance. Pain was just a reminder that I was still alive, and blood was the price I paid to the sea for the chance at freedom. It was a fragile vessel for a heavy burden, but as the water lifted the wood, I felt the first spark of true hope in months. The wind spoke of distant lands and half-forgotten promises, a siren song that pulled me away from the safety of the black obsidian shores. Leaving was a gamble with the gods, but staying meant becoming another ghost in the graveyard of the sea dragon's hidden sanctuary. The mainland was a dream of the past, a fading memory that I clung to while the currents carried me into the heart of the void. I was a speck of dust on a giant's back, navigating the treacherous path between what I was and what the sea had made me. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic creak of the wood and the beating of a heart that refused to stop fighting. Peace is an illusion in these waters. Beneath the calm surface, ancient hungers were stirring, sensing the vibration of my lonely trek home. A shadow from the prehistoric past emerged, a titan of the deep that had survived the ice ages and seen the fall of empires. The Megalodon looked at me with an ancient malice, seeing not a man, but a morsel of flesh in a world of giants. The sheer scale of the predator was paralyzing, a dark cloud beneath my feet that promised a quick and violent end to my journey. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird, the primitive fear of the hunted taking hold of my every nerve and fiber. The sea exploded into chaos as the beast tested my defenses, a warning strike from a king who did not tolerate intruders in his realm. The atmosphere grew heavy with the weight of impending death, the ocean holding its breath for the inevitable strike of the apex predator. Then, the abyss opened its mouth, a cavern of white bone and red flesh that threatened to swallow the sky and me with it. Iron and oak were nothing more than toys in its grip, the raft disintegrating in an explosion of foam and high-tension splintering wood. Gravity betrayed me as I was launched into the void, a brief moment of weightlessness before the inevitable fall back into the predator's reach. The impact was like hitting a wall of stone, the cold water rushing into my ears as I realized I was now prey. I was a speck of light in a sea of death, watching the king of the Ice Age turn back to finish what it had started. Every beat of its tail was a drum roll of doom, the pressure of the water building as the monster closed the distance with terrifying grace. I reached for the light, but the darkness was faster, its cold mouth wide and ready to erase my existence from the world forever. The end was not a whisper, but the roar of 1,000 waves crashing down upon a single fragile life that refused to yield. As the light faded, I felt the ancestral fire in my blood reach its breaking point, a final surge of will before the coming dark. I would not go quietly into the belly of the beast. I would wake the god that lived inside my skin and reclaim the sea. I called out to the depths, not with a voice, but with the power of a legacy that had ruled the oceans since the stars were young. The shockwave was a command, a signal that vibrated through every drop of water, shaking the very foundation of the predator's primitive mind. For the first time in millions of years, the king of sharks felt something it did not understand. The stinging bite of a screaming heart. Deep below, in the crushing pressure of the abyss, the true guardian of the Desambien ship began its ascent to answer my call. It was a streak of living lightning, a phantom made of speed and scales, tearing through the water to protect the one who carried its blood. The sea dragon arrived like a storm, its presence turning the water into a field of electric energy that humbled the surrounding ocean. The impact was a clash of titans, a thunderous strike that sent the shark reeling into the shadows, breaking its momentum and its pride. I was no longer alone. The phantom of the deep was my sword and my shield, a god of the water bound to my very soul. We were two parts of one legend, a union of man and monster that the world had forgotten, but the sea had always remembered. The battle for the throne began in a whirlwind of teeth and scales, a fight that would decide the fate of the surface and the deep. Like a constrictor of the sea, the dragon wrapped itself around the titan, its bioluminescent spines acting as blades that carved through ancient hide. The shark fought with the fury of the darkness, its jaws seeking a killing blow that would end the dragon's reign forever. It was a spectacle of violence and light, a cinematic tragedy played out in the silent theater of the deep, where only the strong survived. The dragon's bite was more than physical. It was an infusion of raw, elemental power that paralyzed the shark's heart and shattered its will. In its agony, the shark tore at the world around it, its massive tail leaving a path of destruction in the once pristine garden of the deep. The ocean was stained with the blood of a king, a dark purple that did not hide the brilliant light of the true successor. The tail strike was a thunderclap underwater, a blunt force that sent the Megalodon spiraling into the water, disoriented and broken by the blow. I felt every hit, every surge of power, as if my own soul was the conductor of this orchestra of destruction and ancient justice. Speed was the dragon's ultimate weapon, a fluidity that made the shark's massive power look clumsy and outdated in this new, electric age. The sea itself was the dragon's weapon, bent and focused into a blinding its path, and stole its sight. The water became a trap, a swirling cage of pressure that forced the shark back toward the darkness from which it had foolishly emerged. The king was dead in spirit, his ancient dominance shattered by a power he could neither eat nor outlast in the shifting tides of fate. The final blow was a mark of shame, a physical reminder that the ocean no longer belonged to the monsters of the past, but to us. The intruder fled back to the cold silence of history, leaving the surface waters to the legacy that had risen to reclaim them at last. The victory was silent, absolute, a triumphant vibration that announced to the world that the sea dragon had returned to its throne. I reached out to my guardian, our spirits finally in sync, as the chaos of battle gave way to the peace of shared destiny. The ascent was slow and majestic, a journey from the depths of death to the promise of a new dawn and the dragon. We were rising out of the shadows of the Iron Atlas, leaving the ghosts of the past behind to embrace the future of the deep. The first breath of air was sweet with the scent of a new beginning, the warm light of the sun chasing away the chill of darkness. The sea was a mirror of fire and gold, a peaceful expanse that hid the terrifying beauty of the battle that had just been won below. My guardian did not leave me. It became my vessel, a living ferry that carried the last of the Iron Atlas's crew toward salvation. The world I once knew was returning, a gray ghost of steel and technology that seemed so small compared to the wonders I had witnessed. The thunder of rotors broke the silence, the rescue I had prayed for finally arriving to take me back to a life that would never be the same. I looked one last time into the eyes of my protector, a silent goodbye to the brother of my blood who had saved my soul. It vanished like a dream into the morning mist, a streak of light that proved the impossible was real and the ocean still had its guards. The soldiers saw a man rescued from a wreck, but they could not see the titan that had escorted me to their very doorstep. The physical marks faded into the shadows of my skin, but the power they held remained, a quiet hum in my veins that would never die. I carried the legacy of the Dead Sea within me, a secret heritage that made me more than human and bound me to the tides forever. The story of the Iron Atlas is over, buried in the sand, but the era of the sea dragon has only just begun.